welcome back to another episode of From the Brink, the Hitching Post podcast. My name is Clay Grossman, and I'm joined by Paul Dehlinger. Say hi, Paul.
Hey.
And I'm joined, as always, by Colby Reynolds, a.k.a. the Colpster today. Say hi, Colby.
Howdy.
Sadly, Blake couldn't join us, but, well, it's been a long sabbatical in between episodes. I'd say, what did you say this morning, Paul, about 15 months here? No, I wouldn't even feign... I wouldn't even feign getting caught up on all the events, but we had a mildly interesting Republican primary. Donald Trump obviously resecured the nomination, and now is being prosecuted in 4 jurisdictions by my count, right? So, yeah, can't even barely. We'll do a very skim version of it. Now we're on a fast track to November here. We're recording this on Saturday, June 29th, 2 days after, what could only be described as a historical presidential debate. I've heard it said that it was the most important presidential debate in history. I don't think that that's a crazy assumption. Paul, well, why don't you open us off? What did you think about the debate, man? Give us your opening thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think this seems like pretty universally accepted that Biden underperformed. It was kind of funny, like, yeah, there was talk about that they had lowered expectations so poorly that I think that the last week Trump was trying to tamp down his own expectations. He's like, well, they're going to pump him up with drugs and, it's going to be a hard debate. And then, I guess none of that really mattered because he just performed so poorly, seemed completely out of it. Even everybody at CNN was saying that this was bad.
Colby, what did you think about the debate?
I thought I've never seen... It's kind of like 2016 in a way where I've never seen anything like this. When I went to work the next day, yesterday, pretty much all the headlines were "Get Biden out." Who's going to replace Biden? We got to get Biden off the ticket and stuff like that. I can't remember last time I've seen something like that. The debate itself was pretty. It was like watching a train on fire going for a cliff and you can't look away, if that makes sense. This is the best performance Trump ever had, I think, in a debate. He was able to contain himself, surprisingly. And then you can definitely tell degradation in Biden's mental capacity in the past 4 years since he was on the stage with them last time. On the comment of the most important presidential debate, I don't know. Honestly, I think probably the first presidential debate between either the first Republican primary debate of back in 2015 or the first presidential debate between Trump and Clinton in 2016 would arguably be more important because that gave more. I think that that was a couple of the first times Trump had a super large audience and was exposed to most of America. Does that make sense?
Okay, I thought you were going to go in a completely different direction with that. I thought you were going to say the first Republican debate, like in 1850.
Oh no, sorry. I mean,
that was I don't know. I think those were probably more important. Lincoln Douglas, even though I guess Lincoln lost that. Well, I don't know. I guess it's up to opinion, but he didn't win that Senate seat. But yeah, I don't know. I would think those are more important. And I don't think he was the first time he was exposed to a large audience because he's a celebrity.
True.
Yeah, the first time he was
I guess more of his
politically,
the first time to tote his plan, his platform for his presidency to such a big audience. Because before it was some rallies and stuff and some press stuff, but then it was just a huge televised event. But also, I was 16 at the time, so my perception is a bit off.
So my take on it is it's probably the most historic presidential debate. You obviously have a lot of, for lack of a better term, Trump was the first convicted felon to ever be on a presidential ticket. You clearly have the 2 oldest presidential candidates. But in terms of importance, I would say it will be mildly important. This kind of segues into my first question here. Obviously, the exit polling immediately after that, it was very skewed towards Trump. I think CNN had it at 60-20. 60% said Trump won the debate. 20% said Biden won the debate. 20% obviously were undecided over here. But obviously the initial polls don't seem like it's going to have a ton of a ripple effect. Now, we'll probably need to wait weeks for a full scope of this. But Paul, I'll ask you, what do you think, if any impact is this going to have on the polling and the general election at large? Is Biden totally cooked at this point? Is this where Trump is going to turn this things around, or where are you seeing this affecting the trajectory at this point in time?
Yeah, I mean, I think he'll get a slight bump. You know, for a while he'd been leading the polls pretty healthily. I think over the last 2 weeks, post-conviction, I don't know if they're correlated, but I think the numbers were starting to kind of close in a little bit. I mean, he was still leading. But yeah, this could probably go back and widen the poll numbers out. I don't think it's not going to be a massive shift. I mean, we're a very polarized society. There's probably 20% of the population wouldn't vote for Biden under any circumstance, and 20% of the population wouldn't vote for Trump under any circumstance. So, it's not going to have a massive effect. But I think it just kind of solidifies what a lot of us have been saying, is that Biden's not where he used to be, even in 2021. Let alone back in 2012 when he was basically acting like Trump to Paul Ryan in the VP debates. So yeah, I think this to Trump's benefit, definitely, unless it gets so bad that they replace him, which then I think this whole thing's kind of reset.
Yeah, I don't get the whole talk on Biden's mental capacity in the past. Y'all may have seen yesterday, I posted something about this, how they just started talking about his cognitive decline in the past year or so, in terms of not just the media, but people in general, because this has been evident. I've seen this since, like, I don't know, 2016 to 2018. I don't know if y'all remember, but there were those there was that meme going around on Twitter where it was like Joe no, and it was people making Joe Biden say stupid stuff, and Obama would say, no, Joe, don't do it, like a bad dog Joe, like that. Do y'all know what I'm talking about, or am I just crazy?
Yeah, I mean, Joe Biden, even in 2012, was kind of known as a gaffe machine. I mean, there's like the sniffing people, which was kind of weird even back then. But I mean, it's like there's one of him telling a guy in a wheelchair to stand up. But I mean, it's not like he's still sharp. It's just, he just gaffes a lot. It's like George Bush. But I mean, there's a clear difference between how he acted even in his 2020 debates and, the Democrat primary than this debate. I mean, obviously it's gotten worse. So, I
agree. I noticed cognitive decline in 2020, though.
Yeah, but I mean, it's all on a curve, it was very apparent in this one, opposed to, and I think in 2020, it's like, well, I mean, he's a nearly 80-year-old guy. People kind of, or I think he was probably still 80 by that point. People kind of expected that, but now they're just kind of aware that it is, we've gotten to the point in the cycle where the right-wing conspiracy becomes like just, mainstream fact. So, but yeah, I mean, I do think like Republicans kind of like cry wolf about this. I mean, there's, like you're saying, you think it was just as, or not just as bad, but you think it was, evident in 2018 and 2019. I'm like, well, I mean, he sounds like an 80-year-old guy, but he's, I guess, relatively still there. And then it just kind of went downhill from there.
Yeah.
So Colby, I'll pose the question to you then. What do you think that this was the death knell for Biden? Do you think where do you think we're looking at in terms of a polling slip up here? Just give me a ballpark figure.
Well, it certainly didn't help. I'm not too. Let's see. Probably it. I agree with Paul that it probably raised Trump's polls by a couple points. I'm on the whole we're so polarized train as well. I think that I could see this. This will sound a bit crazy, I guess, but I could see this as this whole debate, Biden doing the debate, as a Democrat psyop, for lack of a better term, to get him out and put somebody else in, like, I don't know, Newsom or Kennedy wouldn't do it. I don't know, some other Democrat. We'll make him go up there and look absolutely awful, and then that'll finally convince party leadership that we're not going to win if we don't get another guy in, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, the only issue with that is that, the people that would have to try to force him out haven't been doing what they should be, if that was the case. I mean, Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, Barack Obama, nobody's saying, Joe, it looks like it's time to step down. Like a lot of people on CNN are saying that, but none of like the major party bosses. Clyburn, that's another one. It's funny you mentioned that though. Going in with that conspiracy, I know one person that was saying that. Do you think CNN's in on it? Like, because I guess we should ask everybody. But yeah, I personally thought the debate format was really good. I thought the questions were pretty fair. So, what do you think?
I thought it was a great debate, like say on the moderator side. It's a weird timeline, and when Trump is praising CNN for the debate, and I've heard a lot of pundits also say that the format was beneficial to Trump, and that he couldn't interrupt Biden as much as he did in the first presidential debate in 2020. So he came off more moderate. He came off more tamed. Meanwhile, America is talking about the fact that Joe Biden was slack-jawed the entire debate. So I don't know. I think that I think in terms of CNN and their part of this, they did a great job, which I did not expect to be saying ahead of this debate. So I will now throw another question to y'all. So Paul, you kind of hit on it a little bit. Colby a little bit too. Joe Biden. I mean, there's been obviously quite a bit of pundits out there saying that Joe Biden should be removed from the ballot at this point. However, at least to my knowledge, there's no elected officials that have gone on, at least as was this case Friday, that have gone on the record saying that Biden should be taken off the ballot at this point. My opinion has always been it's got to be Jill and Joe that have to, or Jill has to say something to Joe at this point for him to actually get off the ballot at this point. I do believe Joe Biden genuinely sees himself in line with FDR, LBJ, the great in air quotes Democratic presidents of the last 100 years, and he doesn't see himself resigning, and he also sees himself as the only person capable of beating Donald Trump. So factoring all that in, and ahead of the DNC convention, what do y'all give the percentage odds chance that Joe Biden gets removed from the ballot at this point, and who is the most likely candidate in your mind to take over that seat?
Yeah, as far as the likelihood, I don't know. I mean, relatively high, honestly, all things considered. Probably about a quarter, I think there's a 25% chance he gets removed. You're right. I think, it'd probably have to be his wife to convince him because, I think he's kind of a narcissist. I mean, he was in politics so young that he was not like legally allowed to take a seat until his 30th birthday for a Senate seat. As far as who, I don't know, because they've kind of put themselves in this horrible situation where if they, if he steps down, but it's not Kamala, then there's gonna be a lot of people, and they go with like a Newsom. There's gonna be a lot of people who say like that's racist. They robbed the first black woman of a chance to be president. That's why there's all this speculation about Michelle Obama. We're kind of in the cycle every 4 years. There's always some conservatives that start saying, "Oh, they're gonna make Michelle Obama president." I don't see it happening, but yeah, just kind of going back to the ability to swap out the candidate. The DNC actually has a little easier of a time doing this than Republicans would because they have super delegates. And I don't think the super delegates are bound by anybody. It's just like, big party officials that, can sway it one way or the other. They usually just kind of go where the majority of the regular delegates go. So, yeah, if Biden doesn't release his delegates, then, yeah, it's probably still going to be him, though.
Yeah. Colby, what do you think about swapping out Biden?
I think around the same percentage chance. I'd say maybe 30-35% chance that he gets replaced. But like Paul said, they're in a pretty tough spot of who to pick. Newsom has been apparently running a shadow campaign the past year. I don't know what his game is, but he's definitely tried to seem more presidential, if that makes sense. But also, that was a good point, Paul. I didn't think about how the left would erupt if Newsom did become the candidate with, oh, you robbed Harris, you robbed the first female black president of being president, if that makes sense. I guess it's all I think on it for now.
Yeah. I think I'm a little lower on the percentage odds that they actually swap out Biden at this point. I would give it like a 10% chance, and a little bit of that too is, well, Joe Biden passing away before the convention, which is not which based off of his performance on Thursday night would not be a crazy conspiracy theory. I look a little bit of part of this too is I don't think that there's someone that necessarily would step into that role. Gavin Newsom, like you said, seems like the most logical person, the one that would be the most interested in running at this point. But I mean, he's fraught with problems too. I think it's gonna be a tough time convincing Joe Biden because, like you said, Paul, he's a little bit of a narcissist. I think he views himself in line with the great Democratic presidents of the last 100 years. So again, it's wait and see. It's going to come down to Jill and them hopefully realizing it. Hopefully realizing that whatever they're getting out of this, I guess living in the Oval Office, living in the White House, is not worth the chance of having a second Donald Trump term in their mind. So I think with that, we've talked a lot about Joe Biden, and I think a lot of people have talked more on his side, which is a great thing for Trump. But what did y'all what do y'all think of Trump's debate performance? Where do you think he lacked? I mean, I think a lot of people have praised him for some of the one-liners he got on Biden. Clearly, the Medicaid line is going to be one of the great lines in presidential history. I think I personally laughed when he said the line, "I have no idea what he said," right there. I don't think you did either. That one was awesome.
I missed that one, but I caught the Medicaid one.
Yeah. But where do you think the missed opportunities were? Where do you think the greatest victories are for Trump in this case? And well, I guess if you had to give him a grade as well, Paul, where would you stand on that front?
I guess it depends if you're graded on a curve. Like for just like a normal average run-of-the-mill candidate, I don't know, like maybe a C. Like for Trump, probably like an A minus. Like maybe even an A. Like I think I was telling you about that Jim Garrity quote, like it was compared to like an average candidate, Trump did, average, compared to Trump did great. And compared to Biden, he was basically a Cicero. So
Colby, what did you think of Donald Trump? Or do you think he had any missed opportunities here? Do you think where would you rate him to as well on a grade scale?
I thought on the, I guess, zingers, I thought he had some missed opportunities that could have worked. I was thinking of them during the debate. One of them would have been like looking at the moderators. Can you understand what he's saying? But I understand the restraint because the media would have just painted that as elder abuse or something, which I think they talked about a bit in 2020. Some stuff he said about Biden. On his grade, it's the best Trump's ever debated. So I give it, on the Trump scale, A plus, because I don't know how much better we're going to get. And then on, I guess, I haven't seen too many presidential debates. I think I only watched one of Obama and Romney when I was younger. So I give him probably a B, mid B overall in terms of relative to other candidates.
Yeah, my opinion on the debate was, if you came in expecting a full throttle policy discussion and that's what your expectation was, then both candidates failed statistically. But Trump didn't step in the mud too hard. I think a lot of people liked his January 6th answer. I think a lot of people, he didn't step in the mud super hard on what is statistically his most losing issue, abortion. He didn't flub that one too hard. And then he just stuck to his two biggest winning issues, immigration and economy. Mm-hmm. If he was, clearly he got some advice on this one before the debate, because that was, probably about 70% of the debate, immigration and how much better his economy was. Mm-hmm. Factoring all that in, factoring in the lower scales that we are in this idiocracy timeline, I would give Trump a B. I think that's a very fair comparison. Like, say, he didn't give them much more fuel than they needed, and like, say, a lot of the focus has been on Joe Biden and his slack jaw. so now kind of sticking with.
Hey, if I could just kind of push back on that. So I definitely agree that immigration was probably his strongest suit, and he didn't step on abortion. In fact, I thought his abortion answer was really good, even if I'm more to the right on that issue. in fact, yeah, I think Joe Biden really stepped on it because like it was about abortion, and he kind of pivoted to immigration, which is his weakest topic, and he said like people like women are worried about being raped by their sisters, which was kind of weird.
Yeah.
No, I thought his January 6th answer was like probably his worst moment, just because it seemed like he got flustered. That was also part of like where he had to like deny that he'd slept with the porn star, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
It was the best worst answer, I guess, if that was listen, the truth is, I mean, we all know who Donald Trump is as a person. We all know what probably most people feel about January 6th, most people that are in the political center. So when I say he didn't step in the mud completely, I mean, I thought the first part of his line, on January 6th, we had a good economy. On January 6th, we had no immigration. That to me is what's going to resonate here. And yeah, you're right. He did get step in the mud because it's Donald Trump. He's never going to admit that he's wrong on this. I do agree with you, Paul. I think the worst moment was probably the porn star line.
Not the golf game, not the golf discussion.
See, my opinion on the golf tangent was, I think that portrays Biden worse too, because Biden again got stuck in the mud with Trump on that one.
Yeah.
Trump talking about golf and handicaps during a debate. I mean, that's just par for the course. No pun intended. So now, Paul, I wanted to throw a question specifically at you. I think you're the only one here that is not, at least I guess we'll say, content with voting for Trump. I would put myself in that category, content with voting Trump. Did you? So you're probably the closest we have on this podcast to an outsider's perspective, and well, frankly, that I think a lot of people, in a lot of people's minds, the alternative got worse for Joe Biden there. So, what do you think? Do you think your percentage of would you give yourself more likely to vote for Trump? Would you put yourself as less likely, or just about the same at this point in time?
I mean, I guess based on that dichotomy, probably more likely, but I mean, I'm still, pretty against doing that. It's not really about how bad Joe Biden is, because I can already agree. It's more just like, how 2020 ended. I was like, okay, well, this is just gonna get worse if he gets a second term. So that's kind of where I'm at. I think some of it could actually depend on who his VP is. Like if you pick like a Vic, then I'm just like, okay, well, no, like obviously not. But if it's like if you picked Mike Pence again, I'd be like, okay, well, maybe he's learned his lesson. He kind of apologized for everything. I'd be like, okay, maybe you can get another shot. It just kind of depends.
Yeah. My take on it, I mean, this is from someone who didn't vote for Trump in the primaries, is that I think we could have had a much better opportunity at this given time. Like, say, if we'd had anyone else on the ticket. I still don't understand the fascination with Trump as a character at this point in time. He doesn't poll much better than, say, if we had Ron DeSantis on the question. I know a lot of people are saying that, with Trump, there's nothing that is secretive. And so his abortion answer was perfectly in line, perfectly okay with evangelicals voting for him. But I still feel like if we had a younger candidate, someone that could have, again, debated more fluidly and, was not as much of a polarizing candidate, we would have done a lot better in this debate and just generally in the polls right now. But I think like say there's going to be a small blip for Trump. I'm sure some people are going to feel a little better about voting for him, at the very least a little bit worse about voting for Joe Biden moving forward. And Paul, you actually hit on my next question. We are still a few weeks away. I think convention is in August here, so about 4 weeks away from the Republican convention. And there's been a narrowed choice on the Trump VP pick. I would say, what is y'all's preferred candidate at this point? And who do you think is the most likely candidate? And I guess as well, who's the best candidate for Trump in your mind? Colby, I pointed my last question towards Paul. So where do you stand on the Trump VP pick at this point in time?
I think the more obvious pick to try to appease the center is Tim Scott. He sounded pretty good during the primary debates. I like the evangelicalism during that, expressing his faith, which could obviously be a face. But, I mean, if he actually tries to act out what he said somewhat during the Republican debate, I could see him being a pretty good pick. I've heard Burgum. Is it Burgum, Doug? Yeah, Burgum be an option. I don't know really anything about him, and I missed his anything he said during the debate pretty much. So, yeah, no idea about that. I'm curious to learn more about him. I don't know. I'd almost say Abbott, but Abbott's pretty busy with his hands tied down here, and he's doing an okay job down here.
Paul, what do you think about Trump's VP pick? You said it yourself. It would depend on who his pick is, or what would be a candidate in your mind that would make you more likely to vote for Trump.
Well, and just to Colby's, Tim Scott, could be, faking it. It's like, oh no, Republicans never like lied about their religion before to get political advantage. But yeah, like I think Colby's probably right. I think it's kind of really between. Well, I heard he didn't want to pick a senator, but I don't know. South Carolina is a pretty conservative state, so probably pretty easy to replace Scott. But yeah, like I think Scott, just really helps him out with African Americans. I think you get like a 5 or 6 point, bump solely on picking Scott. And I've heard Burgum, like a lot of like people like the hardcore Trump people want are like JD Vance. Like I don't think Trump wants to take Vance out of the Senate. Plus the governor is like a more like my kind of conservative, so he would pick somebody I would like to replace Vance in the Senate. So I guess Trump doesn't want to do that.
Here's a thought. Sorry, real quick. I think Trump's such a wild card that I wouldn't be surprised if he pulled a this guy's never going to agree to it, but if he pulled a, hey, Joe Manchin's going to be my VP. Do y'all see that as completely a surprise? Because I don't.
Yeah. Well, I think it'd be a surprise. As far as whether Joe Manchin would do it, I don't know. I could see Joe Manchin doing that. I mean, what else is he going to do? Like, I think he wants to run for governor again of Virginia or West Virginia. But oh yeah, you asked me like my favorite pick. I don't know. I mean, like I'm fine with Burgum. I think I used to be a big fan of Marco Rubio, kind of less so in the last 4 years. Also, there's like the 12th Amendment they have to consider, so one of them has to move, and I think it's just insane the idea that a sitting senator would move to appease Trump's ego. So yeah, like I don't. Like I said, it's most likely going to be Scott. I'd be fine with Burgum. If it is Vivek, then yeah, basically, I'm just done. I'm not going to vote for him under any circumstance if that's what he does.
Yeah, my opinion has always been you want someone that juxtaposes really well against Kamala Harris, and then you want someone that covers Trump's weak spots. So what is Trump's weak spots? You have someone who's probably, I think, a little unhinged. I think that's sort of what the Doug Burgum case is. Here's Doug Burgum, the most boring guy ever, governor of North Dakota. Never heard anyone, never really known before the 2024 primaries writ large. You want someone who's going to be able to challenge Kamala Harris, presumably in a vice presidential debate, which is why I'm actually kind of a little bit anti-Tim Scott. He's kind of got this reputation as being a soft-spoken, mild-mannered Southern kid. And again, you want someone that's going to really, like say, I think Pence very clearly won the vice presidential debate.
In
2020. So you want someone that's going to, again, hold Kamala's feet to the fire and again show why she's statistically one of the worst vice presidential picks ever. My money, and I don't think Trump would do this, would be Glenn Youngkin. Someone who's, that a more moderate appeal, someone that's, I guess you could say, more of a middle of the road Republican. Virginia's not going to be a swing state, I don't think, in this election, but you want someone that's going to balance out the ticket a little bit and not alienate any more voters. I think JD Vance would be a bad pick. I do like Marco Rubio, Paul, but you're right. You would Trump or Rubio would have to move at this point as to not getting into constitutional questions. And I do like Doug Burgum. I do feel a little bit of the Bergmentum going on there. I think one underrated moment from 2024 was him tearing his Achilles and playing basketball and then going into one of the Republican debates. It was like 2 or 3 days removed from that. So yeah, you talk about someone that's gonna come to bat for you. But I think Youngkin has the most broad appeal, and I think would and in an alternative timeline maybe Nikki Haley, but I don't think Trump would would be willing to do that one. So,
well,
yeah,
just to push back, or not push back, but yeah, I think the most underrated moment is Doug Burgum giving you $20 to donate $1 to his campaign. But yeah, like to Youngkin's point, I could see Virginia maybe being in play if he's the nominee or the VP. I don't know if they'll I doubt they would get it, but yeah, I could see it being within
I think DC
3 or 4
holds
points.
that state hostage too much to do that, in my personal opinion.
Yeah. When was the last time Virginia went for Republicans? 2004, I believe it was now. So be a tough sell, but you never know. Like I say, you get a lot closer to that with Glenn Youngkin. So I guess with that, would y'all want to go closing statements? Do y'all want to say anything else?
I want to bring up the foreign policy discussion during the debate. I think that was also a shining moment of Trump. That's one of my favorite moments during this past debate was Trump bringing up how, look, Ukraine wouldn't have happened, which I think is a pretty arguably plausible, and bringing up Afghanistan, bringing up the evacuation from Afghanistan, because that's been out of the press for way too long. Because unfortunately, that happened so early in Biden's presidency that a lot of Americans just forgot about it. And I think that's one of his worst, not public relations, but worst, I don't know, worst perception on the world stage during this entire presidency is our failed evacuation from Afghanistan. And I'm happy Trump brought that back up into the spotlight.
Yeah, no, I would definitely agree with Colby on that one. That's kind of, if you look at like his poll numbers, that's definitely where it started going down. And it's funny, like CNN, even though they said they thought Biden did really bad, they would already prefix it with, well, of course, Trump lied constantly. I'm like, okay, yeah, but Biden lied a lot too. Like he said, no servicemen died in combat under his administration. I was like, that's not true at all.
Yeah,
not even this year, but specifically, the 13 soldiers that died in Afghanistan during the withdrawal. So yeah, I mean that's a pretty bald-faced lie. And we could go into like, he also said there was like 15% unemployment when he came into office. That wasn't true. He said there was massive inflation when he came into office. That wasn't true. So yeah, there was like just a lot of lies on Biden's side as well. So
I also I'm sorry.
No, you're good.
I also liked being called an enemy of the state. That was pretty great on live national televised television, not just in some speech, but yeah. Well, I guess, it's the kind of thing. Both were nationally televised, but it's nice to hear it again. Just
I think CNN was actually kind of surprised. I think they, plan on him having like more of a middle of the road answer. Like, no, I think, these are good people that have just been persuaded by Trump's lies and, et cetera, et cetera. Instead, he's like, well, the more they know, yes, they are enemies of the state. I was like, what?
And that's the killer thing. He said yes. He shouldn't have said yes. And when I heard that question, I thought, oh, he's just going to do a middle of the road answer. No, this man, he took the bait because he wasn't thinking, and it was, I couldn't believe it.
Yeah. Well, my takeaway on this debate was, if I had given the choice between watching it again and sitting in a room watching paint dry, specifically lead paint, I probably would probably take the latter on this case. But I wanted to ask too as well. I mean, there is considerable, I'd say, polarity. Gosh, I can't speak today. I've been watching a little bit too much Joe Biden's speeches on this case. I mean, listen, if any other candidate in any other timeline had given as bad a performance as Joe Biden, you would expect the other candidate to, be eviscerating them. But we all sort of agree that there's not going to be it's going to be a ripple rather than a giant spike for Trump. So let me ask you this: if you're Robert Kennedy, you're probably licking your chops right about now, right? I think he was the biggest winner on Thursday, if I had to guess, just throwing it out there. What do y'all think the percentage odds now that Robert Kennedy does well and does well enough to get into the next presidential debate here in September are?
I would say 0. Like, I think, like, I understand why that might seem contradictory, but I think he's already peaked. I think, what was he peaked around? Was it 15%? And he's just been going down since then. I think just most of the most of the Republican support he got kind of came home back to Trump, and most of the Democrat support he had came back to, to Biden. So just like it, I feel like the only people that are still maybe Kennedy fans are just people that are just so anti-vax, and maybe just some more traditional Democrats are just kind of upset with how left Biden has gotten. That's just my opinion.
Colby, what do you think?
In this day and age of American politics, I wouldn't be surprised, but I don't see how this debate would have affected him too much, because the perception is so focused on Biden himself. I think the ripple effect more likely would be, as we discussed earlier, replacing Biden as the primary candidate.
Yeah. So my take on the Robert Kennedy thing, I agree with you, Paul. I don't think they're going to let him into the debate unless something, again, unless he starts polling in the high 20s, low 30s. I think that would be about the bar that they would almost have to do something. But I do say, if what we're saying is true, and there's only, we're giving it a low chance that Biden actually does get replaced before the convention. I do think that there's going to be a lot of Democratic voters that are going to go towards Kennedy's camp at this point in time. I give that, again, because what you said, Colby, there is a wide amount of discontent, but none of the elected officials are going out there and saying it. I think James Clyburn from South Carolina came online and said we got to run the course with him. Obviously, Kamala came out and said, don't judge him on 90 minutes, judge him on the last 3.5 years, which is basically a concession that he did very bad in this debate. So
yeah.
I think if they don't replace Biden, there's going to be maybe a potential for a 5 to 10 point swing towards Kennedy, just on the fact that there are so many disaffected voters towards Biden at this point. But yeah, I think that's, y'all still want to do some open discussion here. I'm open to any other comments about the debate here. I mean, we can totally talk about what their actual handicap was over here. I think another aspect of that, Biden corrected himself, right? He went from I have a 6 handicap to an 8 handicap. So, come on, Joe.
Yeah, because that's what we were all really worried about, is like whether he's being honest about what his golf handicap was.
Yeah. And that is the biggest lie of the night. That was another one that really
that was a good one.
Really made me wait. Another thing is I watched this debate in a movie theater.
Really?
Yeah, KFYO, our local
Humble
news station. They did a watch party, so it kind of added to the emphasis on this one. You get audible gasps from people.
Yeah.
Whenever. I was reading a little bit about it. They were doing some Democratic watch parties, and in Chicago and we're out, and people were just so blown away. I think, Paul, you said it yesterday. There, people were really coping on Twitter. I really do think that this was probably I would say the clearest example to the biggest audience of Joe Biden being a senile person. So I don't know. I would still give, if I was to say the election were held today, Trump would win. But we're in Trump's America. Things could shift on a dime. We could be talking a completely different scandal that comes out of the Trump camp or Biden camp in a week's time. So I still give in November, I would still give Joe Biden the slight edge, as crazy as that is to say at this point. But what do y'all think on that question? I mean,
do you think the slight edge comes from the status of being the incumbent? Because I know that definitely helps in elections.
Yes, he does have a slight edge, and I think it is just the broad unpopularity. I think people still have a sour taste from 2020. People kind of forget about COVID times, just a little bit. But the image of January 6th, the image of the perception of chaos coming from the Trump camp. I think that's still a real thing. That's it's gonna create a pretty low ceiling, even if Joe Biden gets worse, which seems crazy to say, but I've also been blown away by Joe Biden getting worse and not getting taken off the ballot before at this point. So I'll throw the question to you, Paul. Where do you think the consensus is heading? Do you still give Joe Biden the edge, or do you give Trump the edge at this point in time?
Well, to your question about if the election was held today, I think people would be really confused because, like, they'd say, "I thought it was on Tuesdays." But I would probably give Trump the edge now, maybe like slight, even though like the Democrats have built-in advantages, just because there's more Democrats than Republicans, and I think like 10 to 15% of Republicans are just so, disgusted with Trump that they're like, like me, are just gonna vote, write their name in or their uncle's name in. I can't really vote third party because all the third party candidates are terrible. But yeah, but even with all that, I think just, there's a lot of bad numbers right now, even though unemployment's not super high. Like inflation's been, higher than average for too long.
I heard house prices are up 30%. I don't know where that
said 20, but that's like not on a yearly basis. That's probably since he took office.
That's still significant. That's quiet.
I agree. Yeah. Well, I mean, because yeah, unless you get deflation, which also isn't good, but yeah, like prices don't come down; they just kind of stabilize at this new higher price, and you hope wage growth eventually, makes up the difference. But yeah, I mean, I think things are more expensive. I guess the one thing Biden kind of benefits from is like, oil is not at like $120 a barrel like it used to be back in 2022. So they've kind of like stabilized around I don't know for y'all, what is it, like $3 a gallon for gas?
310.
Yep. 310. Yeah, it's 283 here. So I don't know. Usually like we have the worst prices, which is weird. Like we produce all the oil, but for some reason Dallas gets cheap gas. I don't know why.
Weird. I see. Houston has the cheapest, I think, which makes total sense. But Sherman has cheaper gas than Dallas or Denton, which doesn't make entire sense to me. Lubbock always had cheaper gas than Denton. But
yep.
I'd expect Midland to be similar to like Lubbock prices.
Well, it has more to do with like the people that buy the gas like in huge quantities, so like the speculators.
Mm-hmm.
It's just always seemed like the bigger cities, could demand better prices on the refined product, even though, like I said, we produce a lot of oil and then we have a refinery in Big Spring, which isn't that far away.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I guess to wrap all that up, yeah, it's probably give it the edge to Trump, but just slightly. But yeah, do you want to kind of talk about some of the just where we see the like world politics going in the the rest of the year and then like the economy?
Sure.
I will take the bait on this one. I do think Israel will eventually have to get into Rafah. I think that they can't wait. I don't know if necessarily what the Biden camp is going to do continually about that. I do expect Russia and Ukraine to heat up a little bit this summer because it's just the seasonal thing, right? Where they can actually do ground offensives.
Yeah, the season actually right about now is the season where the mud dries up for like 3 months.
Yeah, so there is a real chance that we have a bloodier summer in terms of the Russia-Ukraine war and the Israel versus Hamas war, and then Taiwan and China. Obviously, I think there's a perception on the right that China would completely go full on Taiwan. I think it's a real possibility. Listen, I think there's obviously a perception that Trump is a strong man. I think there's a perception that Joe Biden is a mildly weak person, to put it nicely. A doddering old fool. How about that? Is that more?
Better. Yeah,
is that a more apt comparison? So I do think there's a real chance that as Biden enters as it looks incredibly likely that Trump might win, or more likely that Trump might win, that our forward adversaries would go harder on the global stage, and that's great concern. It's also a feather in the cap for Trump if there's a perception that either the economy is going to crap or the world is going to crap. You would have a much better argument, I think, if you're middle of the ground too, to make a case for Trump in this case. So
Colby? I think on the Taiwan thing, for the past couple of years, I've watched China Uncensored, and that's a pretty good source of inside China politics and news. I think now on the Taiwan case, China's been struggling with the housing economy in general. There's too many young men, not enough young women because the one-child policy and some other factors. I think now is a make or break situation for China and Taiwan. I think they're running out of time. They got this economy issues and the population issues and some other issues hanging over their head, that if they want Taiwan, this is going to be their last chance to get it before presumably Trump gets back in office. So I think that's I don't have a likely percentage of that happening, but I think it could be very, very possible here in the next 4 months.
I will say the demographics of China and Russia kind of limit them to making large ground offensives in the 2020s. Like after the end of this decade, there will be less. I would say less of a chance that China. You're right, Colby. That China could take Taiwan or Russia could take Ukraine.
The prices are equalizing on manufacturing, so companies aren't as keen to. They're pulling out, and they're not as keen of sending production there, which doesn't help their economy. I think they had some inflation issue and some debt issue. I can't remember exactly.
China has all of the same
deflation right now.
Yeah, China has all of the same issues as us, like you said, Colby. Housing, marriage rates, things of that nature, population decline that we have, but they're just exacerbated in some cases. So yeah, I mean, there's a real chance. There's a real chance that either as Joe Biden looks like he's going to lose, or whatever he enters into the lame duck session, presumably after November, that things will heat up again on the global political stage. I think we are closer to a serious world conflict, even Israel and Hamas. I mean, the demographics of Hamas of the Gaza Strip dictated them to have this attack. This was their pinnacle where they would have the most amount of young men to fight a war. And China, this is the pinnacle where they can make a Taiwanese offensive. And Russia, this is their last real chance to do it. And so, if there's a perception that Trump is stronger on foreign policy, then we would. There's a real chance. I give it a considerable chance, maybe a 25 to 30% chance that China actually does something against Taiwan, whether it be a blockade or an invasion. The
consequences of an offensive against Taiwan are pretty scary too, because as y'all know, I have some experience in both the computer chip and heavy trucking industry. And this computer chip industry affects all of us today. But what's really horrifying is how much it affects the trucking industry, because there's so many different little things on our trucks that require chips. So we don't have these new fabs going up yet. They're actually being delayed because they're not getting the funding from the CHIPS Act, because they're not meeting the diversity quota or some crap. There's some requirement that you got to have a certain percentage of women on the construction force for these fabs. And a lot of these fabs in the past couple of months have slowed down production. For instance, the Texas Instruments is making a fab up in Sherman, and they're not on schedule. They're not going to get that thing done when they say they do. But besides that, the effect on the trucking industry, if both these new fabs aren't running and the fabs in Taiwan can't export, is going to not shut down, but it's going to gravely affect truck production and getting trucks on the road. And trucks are what keeps cargo and commerce moving across this entire nation. 60% of all freight in this country is hauled by semi-truck. So I'm sure it's not hard to imagine the detrimental effects of trucking kind of stalling in this country due to a complete lack of chips coming in.
Yeah, but the kind of chips coming out of Taiwan aren't put in trucks. I mean, the kind of chips they make are super high-end ones, like for
that's true.
High-end for computers, for phones. I mean, those are more like mid-level chips, I would think, that come out of more like Southeast Asia, which could also be a problem, but it's not really necessarily because the new fabs are supposed to be for the high-end 3 to 5 nanometer chips, I think, because that's kind of what we were trying to bring back into the state. It was the high-end ones. But I mean, just going back to y'all's Taiwan point. Apparently, and I've kind of looked into this a lot. I shouldn't say that. Listening to people that know more about it, listening to them talk about it. But apparently, like, Taiwan is just super hard to invade. We actually just bypassed it during World War II, after Iwo Jima, and went just straight to the next island.
So I don't want to get into too lost into the weeds because I could literally talk about this for hours. But Taiwan's geography is a lot like Japan's, where there's a plain on the eastern side which is heading towards the China, or sorry, the western side. There's a plain where on the western side where it's where most of the population lives. That's where Taipei is, and then there's the heavy mountains on to the eastern side. So what would most likely happen in a Chinese Taiwan war game, China would attempt a ground invasion, or a sea invasion, which, you know, I'm skeptical that they have the naval capacity to do it. But if they were successful and are able to make a landing, what would happen is Taiwan would retreat to the east, and all of their semiconductor manufacturing, all of the stuff that makes Taiwan great would go towards defense, in which time they would have a stalemate where I would say China would not be able to take over the mountain ranges. I'm skeptical that they can make a sea invasion. I'm really skeptical that they could actually fully conquer through the Taiwanese mountain range. And also, we kind of hit the nail on the head a little bit, but what's most likely going to happen in this scenario is there's going to be either a U.S. blockade or there's some economic crash because of the Taiwanese semiconductor industry being kind of shut down. And at that point, I would say the political pressure in China would become exacerbated. I mean, if without China being able to be a mass export economy, I would think there would be riots in the streets within a few months if they didn't immediately win the war, which, as I kind of laid out, I would say it's unlikely that they would win within a year, even of a war. So my thinking is China invades Taiwan and they fall into a civil war, which becomes one of the bloodiest conflicts in human history. If you look at like the top 25, 30 biggest atrocities in human history, like half of them take place in China. It's a really fascinating case study there, and I wonder what's going to happen in a world where the demographic issues and the societal issues of communist China come to a full head. And I think that would. So getting back to the topic of Joe Biden and Trump, if China did actually invade Taiwan, there's real potential that it becomes one of the bloodiest conflicts in human history. Not even excluding what the U.S.'s response would lead to. So, yeah, needless to say, a lot at stake in the next 4 months. Am I right, fellas?
Oh yeah,
yeah, definitely. Well, I mean, I guess do you want to stop there? Do you think it's a good stopping point?
I would say so. I think ending the image of a great Chinese civil war potentially brewing is a perfect ending to, I would say, one of our most interesting timelines. So I think we'll probably get another one in the next few weeks, I imagine, before the next presidential debate here in September, or as the next big headline comes on, because we're in Trump's America. In 2 weeks, we could be having a completely different conversation. So I would say thank you for listening. It's been a pleasure, as always, to talk about these things. Paul, Colby, do y'all want to have any closing remarks?
I don't think I have any.
No, I think I'm good.
Sweet. Well, thank y'all for listening, and we appreciate your support. And have a great day and have a great weekend wherever you are. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye.
Sweet.